Imagine meeting countless people, hearing different stories, sharing new conversations, and still finding yourself quietly measuring every meaningful connection against one that never completely left your heart. That is exactly where this story begins. Your soulmate never intended to make comparisons. In fact, they promised themselves they wouldn't. They believed every new chapter deserved a fresh beginning, untouched by memories of what came before. But life has a curious way of revealing what truly matters when we least expect it. With every new friendship, every meaningful conversation, and every relationship that seemed full of promise, there was always one quiet moment when something felt different. It wasn't that the people they met lacked kindness or sincerity. It was simply that the feeling they were searching for never arrived in quite the same way. At first, they ignored that thought. They convinced themselves they were expecting too much, that memories naturally become more beautiful with time. Yet the pattern continued repeating itself. They discovered laughter, but not the same sense of peace. They found excitement, but not the same feeling of being understood without explanation. They experienced companionship, yet something deep within them continued whispering that a rare connection cannot be recreated simply by meeting someone new. The realization didn't happen overnight. It arrived gradually, one experience after another, until it became impossible to dismiss. What surprised them most wasn't that they kept remembering this connection. It was the reason behind those memories. They began realizing they weren't comparing faces, personalities, or moments. They were comparing how they felt within the connection itself. They remembered feeling accepted without needing to pretend, understood without explaining every emotion, and comfortable enough to let their guard down completely. Those qualities proved far rarer than they had ever imagined. The more life introduced them to different experiences, the more they recognized the quiet depth of what they had once shared. As this understanding settled into their heart, something unexpected happened. Instead of looking at the past with longing, they began looking at it with gratitude. They finally understood that some connections leave such a lasting impression, not because they are perfect, but because they reveal a version of ourselves that feels genuine, safe, and completely authentic. And for the first time, your soulmate stopped asking why nothing else felt the same. They started asking a far more meaningful question: what made this connection so unforgettable in the first place? That single question became the beginning of a journey that would change everything they believed about love. Trust and the kind of bond that cannot easily be replaced. And listen carefully, because this is where your soulmate begins noticing something they never expected. It wasn't a single conversation or one unforgettable moment that changed their perspective. Instead, it happened through dozens of ordinary experiences that slowly revealed an extraordinary truth. Every time they formed a new connection, they found themselves paying attention to small details they had once overlooked. They noticed how conversations flowed, how silence felt, how disagreements were handled, and how comfortable they truly felt when they allowed themselves to be completely genuine. At first, they believed these observations were simply part of becoming more mature. But as time passed, they realized they were measuring each experience against a quiet standard that had already been set long ago. They hadn't intended to make comparisons. In fact, they tried not to. Yet their heart continued recognizing the difference before their mind was willing to admit it. What surprised them most was that the comparison had very little to do with excitement or romance. It centered on something much deeper. They realized they were searching for a feeling of emotional ease that seemed impossible to manufacture. In many relationships, they found admiration, shared interests, or enjoyable moments. but something essential always felt slightly incomplete. Conversations required more effort. Vulnerability felt more difficult. They often found themselves explaining who they were instead of simply being themselves. That quiet difference became impossible to ignore because it repeated itself again and again. Rather than feeling discouraged, they became curious. They started asking themselves why one connection had created such a lasting sense of comfort while so many others, despite their own positive qualities, never quite reached the same place because your heart needs this right now. Some experiences quietly redefine our expectations without us realizing it. They teach us that the greatest gift in any meaningful relationship is not constant excitement, but the freedom to be authentic without fear of judgment. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that this was the quality they had been searching for all along. It wasn't perfection they missed. It was the rare experience of feeling deeply understood without having to constantly explain themselves. Once they recognized that truth, everything else began making sense. As this awareness grew stronger, they started noticing another unexpected pattern. The connections that seemed impressive on the surface often faded quickly once everyday life settled in. The excitement of something new gradually gave way to routine, and it was during those ordinary moments that they recognized what had always made this connection different. Genuine understanding had never depended on perfect circumstances. It had shown itself during quiet conversations, shared laughter over simple things, moments of patient listening, and the ability to remain present even when life became complicated. Those qualities proved remarkably difficult to find again, not because they were impossible, but because they were incredibly rare. This realization encouraged your soulmate to stop focusing on what other relationships lacked and begin appreciating what this connection had quietly offered. They understood that comparison was no longer about choosing one person over another. It was about recognizing the qualities that truly mattered to them. They discovered that trust could never be replaced by appearances. Emotional safety could never be substituted with temporary excitement. Honest communication would always outlast impressive first impressions. These discoveries slowly reshaped the way they viewed every relationship moving forward. Instead of searching for someone who simply looked right from the outside, they became interested in finding the quiet consistency that creates lasting closeness. And listen to this, because another important lesson soon followed. They realized that many people spend years chasing intense emotions while overlooking the relationships that offer genuine peace. For a long time, they had believed love should always feel dramatic or uncertain to remain meaningful. Now they understood something entirely different. The strongest connections often feel calm rather than chaotic. They create confidence instead of constant confusion. They encourage growth instead of insecurity. This understanding completely changed their perspective because they finally recognized that the qualities they admired most had been present in this connection from the very beginning, because your heart needs this right now. Life has a way of teaching us what is truly valuable by allowing us to experience many different paths before we fully recognize the one that shaped us the most. Your soulmate no longer sees these comparisons as a sign of being unable to move forward. Instead, they see them as evidence that they have learned what they genuinely value in a meaningful relationship. Every experience has helped refine their understanding. Every conversation has revealed another important lesson. Every connection has quietly shown them that authenticity, trust, patience, and emotional honesty are far more difficult to find than they once believed. And with each passing day, they become more certain that what made this connection unforgettable was never a single extraordinary moment, It was the quiet foundation of mutual understanding that revealed its true worth only after they had experienced enough of life to recognize just how rare it really was. And listen carefully, because something inside your soulmate has quietly shifted without them even realizing it at first. For so long, they believed they were searching for another relationship that could finally help them leave the past behind. They thought that if they met enough people, experienced enough new beginnings, or gave life enough time, one connection would eventually feel just as meaningful. But instead of finding a replacement, they found something completely unexpected. Every new experience slowly became a lesson rather than a distraction. Each relationship taught them something valuable, but none of them answered the question that had quietly followed them all along. Why did this one connection continue to leave such a lasting impression when everything else gradually became another chapter of life? The more they reflected on that question, the more they realized the answer had nothing to do with comparison and everything to do with understanding. They began noticing that many relationships start with excitement, but excitement alone rarely creates something that lasts. It can capture attention for a moment, but it cannot replace the quiet confidence that grows through genuine trust. They remembered how easy it once felt to share thoughts without carefully choosing every word. How natural it felt to sit together in silence without feeling uncomfortable. And how even difficult conversations carried a sense of mutual respect instead of fear. Looking back now, they understood those moments were never ordinary. At the time, they simply accepted them as normal, because they had never experienced anything different. Only after meeting many different people did they begin recognizing how uncommon those qualities truly were. That realization changed everything because they stopped measuring relationships by what appeared impressive on the surface and started valuing what quietly endured beneath it, because your heart needs this right now. Some of life's greatest lessons arrive long after the moment itself has passed. We often fail to recognize the value of something while it is naturally part of our everyday life. Only when we experience something different do we begin understanding what we once held without fully appreciating it. Your soulmate has reached exactly that point. They are beginning to see that this connection was never memorable because it was perfect. It became unforgettable because it allowed them to experience a level of emotional honesty they have struggled to find anywhere else. That realization has given them a completely different perspective on what they truly want their future to be built upon. As this understanding continued growing, they became much more intentional about the people they allowed into their life. Instead of asking whether someone seemed exciting, they started asking whether they felt emotionally safe. Instead of focusing on appearances, they paid attention to consistency. Instead of becoming impressed by grand promises, they began noticing small acts of reliability, kindness, patience, and genuine interest. They discovered that lasting relationships are not built through dramatic moments that happen once in a while. They are built through countless ordinary moments where two people continue choosing honesty, respect, and understanding, even when life becomes complicated. That lesson quietly transformed every expectation they once carried. And listen to this, because another realization slowly found its way into their heart. They understood they had been searching for familiarity without fully understanding what familiar truly meant. It wasn't about repeating the past or finding someone exactly the same. It was about rediscovering the feeling of emotional authenticity that this connection had awakened within them. They realized that the greatest gift any meaningful relationship offers is the freedom to become more fully yourself. instead of feeling pressured to become someone else. Once they understood that, the endless comparisons began fading away. They no longer looked at new people wondering whether they could replace what came before. Instead, they looked inward, asking whether a relationship encouraged the same honesty, peace, and mutual growth that had become their new standard. This change also transformed the way they viewed themselves. They became more patient with their own journey because they understood that meaningful connections are not found by rushing through life searching for perfection. They grow through shared experiences, mutual trust, emotional openness, and the willingness to remain present through both joyful and difficult seasons. They stopped believing that love should constantly prove itself through dramatic emotions. Instead, they came to appreciate the quiet confidence that develops when two people consistently make one another feel respected, heard, and valued. That discovery gave them a sense of clarity they had been searching for without even realizing it, because your heart needs this right now. Every meaningful connection leaves behind more than memories. It quietly shapes the standards by which we understand trust, kindness, and genuine companionship. Your soulmate now recognizes that every relationship they experienced afterward was never competing against the past. Each one simply helped reveal what truly mattered to them. Rather than feeling disappointed by those comparisons, they now feel grateful for the wisdom they have gained. They understand that the most unforgettable relationships are rarely the loudest or the most dramatic. They are the ones that quietly teach us what it feels like to be accepted, encouraged, and understood at our deepest level. And with every passing day, that understanding becomes less about looking backward and more about preparing themselves to build a future rooted in authenticity, emotional maturity, and the kind of connection whose value only becomes clearer with time. And listen carefully, because this is the moment when your soulmate realizes that the greatest impact of this connection was never the memories it created. It was the standard it quietly established for every relationship that followed. Until now, they believed they had simply been comparing people, searching for familiar emotions in unfamiliar places. But they have finally discovered that something much deeper has been happening all along. Every comparison has slowly been teaching them what truly deserves a place in their life and what only appears meaningful for a short time. The more they reflect on everything they have experienced, the more they understand that this connection reshaped their expectations without them even noticing. It quietly changed the way they define trust, loyalty, understanding, and emotional closeness. That realization has become impossible to ignore because it influences every decision they make today. For a long time, they thought finding happiness meant meeting someone who could immediately create excitement. They believed that powerful first impressions would naturally grow into lasting relationships. But experience taught them something entirely different. They discovered that excitement can appear quickly and disappear just as fast, while genuine understanding often grows slowly through patience, honesty, and consistency. Looking back now, they realize that what made this connection unforgettable was never dramatic moments or perfect circumstances. It was the quiet reliability that remained even when life became uncertain. It was knowing they could speak honestly without fear of being misunderstood. It was the comfort of feeling accepted without constantly trying to earn approval. Those simple experiences seemed ordinary at the time, yet today they recognize them as extraordinary because they have learned how uncommon they truly are. Because your heart needs this right now. Life rarely teaches us the value of something while we are comfortably living inside it. More often, we understand its worth only after stepping away and seeing how different the world can feel without it. Your soulmate has reached that understanding. They no longer see this connection as something that belongs only to the past. They see it as the experience that quietly taught them what emotional security truly feels like. That lesson has become one of the greatest gifts they have ever received because it has given them clarity that many people spend years searching for. As their perspective continues changing, they notice something remarkable about themselves. They have become much more patient with the process of building meaningful relationships. They no longer feel the need to rush into emotional decisions simply because someone seems interesting or because circumstances appear ideal. Instead, they pay attention to the qualities that reveal themselves over time. They notice how someone responds during difficult conversations. They observe whether actions consistently match words. They appreciate people who create peace instead of unnecessary uncertainty. These small observations have become far more important than grand promises, because experience has taught them that lasting love is built through everyday choices rather than extraordinary declarations. And listen to this, because another beautiful realization has quietly taken root within them. They understand now that comparison is slowly fading away. Not because they have forgotten this connection, but because they have finally understood what they were truly comparing in the first place. It was never about finding another person who looked, acted, or spoke the same. It was about finding the same feeling of emotional authenticity that allowed them to become their truest self. Once they recognized that, everything else became much clearer. They stopped expecting people to recreate the past and instead started looking for relationships where honesty, kindness, respect, and mutual growth could naturally flourish. This shift has given them a sense of freedom they have not experienced before because they are no longer chasing memories. They are pursuing values. They have also become much more aware of their own role in creating healthy relationships. Instead of asking only what another person can offer, they have started asking how they can contribute to the same atmosphere of trust and understanding that they once appreciated so deeply. They realize that meaningful connections are never sustained by one person alone. They require patience from both hearts, compassion from both perspectives, and a shared commitment to continue choosing one another even when life becomes complicated. This understanding has inspired them to become more thoughtful, more emotionally available, and more willing to communicate with honesty instead of assumption. Because your heart needs this right now. Every unforgettable connection leaves behind something greater than beautiful memories. It leaves behind wisdom that quietly guides future decisions. Your soulmate now understands that this connection did not simply change the way they felt about one relationship. It transformed the way they will approach every meaningful relationship for the rest of their life. They have learned that genuine love is not measured by how loudly it announces itself, but by how peacefully it remains present through ordinary days. They have learned that trust grows through consistency, respect grows through understanding, and lasting happiness grows where two people feel safe enough to become completely themselves. Now they find themselves standing at the beginning of a different chapter, carrying lessons they never expected to learn. The endless comparisons that once filled their thoughts have slowly transformed into quiet certainty about what truly matters. They are no longer searching for someone who can imitate what was once experienced. They are searching for a connection built upon the same foundation of honesty, patience, emotional safety, and mutual respect. And deep within their heart, they know that this discovery has not only changed the way they see love, it has changed the kind of person they are becoming. Someone who now understands that the rarest relationships are not remembered because they are perfect, but because they inspire us to become wiser, kinder, and more authentic than we were before. And now, as this story reaches its final chapter, your soulmate has finally stopped asking themselves the question that once echoed through their heart. For so long, they wondered why every meaningful relationship seemed to remind them of this one. They believed something was missing, something they simply couldn't explain. But after everything they have experienced, they now understand that the answer was never about finding someone exactly the same. It was about recognizing the rare qualities that this connection awakened within them. Every comparison, every unanswered feeling, and every quiet realization has slowly led them to a truth they could not see before. Some connections become unforgettable, not because they ask us to live in the past, but because they quietly redefine what we value for the future. Looking back, they no longer measure this connection by the moments they shared alone. Instead, they measure it by the person they have become because of it. They notice how much more patient they are when building trust. They recognize how much more deeply they listen when someone speaks from the heart. They appreciate honesty in ways they never understood before, and they value consistency far more than grand promises. These changes did not happen overnight. They grew slowly through every experience that followed, quietly reminding them that meaningful relationships are built through everyday choices rather than extraordinary moments. Without realizing it, this connection became the foundation upon which they now understand love itself, because your heart needs this right now. Life often teaches its greatest lessons through experiences we only fully appreciate with time. There are relationships that bring excitement, others that teach resilience, and a few that quietly change the way we see ourselves forever. Your soulmate has come to realize that this connection belongs to that rare group. It challenged their expectations, expanded their understanding, and revealed qualities they never knew mattered so deeply until they tried to find them again. What once felt like comparison now feels like clarity. They are no longer searching for someone to recreate the past. They are searching for a relationship that reflects the same values that made this one so meaningful. As this understanding settles into their heart, another quiet transformation begins. They stop viewing every new relationship as a test against old memories. Instead, they approach each new connection with openness and wisdom. They understand that every person is unique, yet they also know that certain qualities should never be compromised. Mutual respect, emotional honesty, genuine support, patient communication, and the freedom to be completely authentic have become the standards they refuse to abandon. They finally understand that these qualities are not unrealistic expectations. They are the very things that allow trust to grow and love to endure through life's changing seasons. Something else has changed as well. Your soulmate has become grateful instead of conflicted. Rather than feeling frustrated that nothing ever seemed to compare, they now appreciate why that happened. Every experience helped them recognize what truly mattered. Every relationship that felt incomplete quietly highlighted the emotional depth they once experienced. Instead of seeing those moments as disappointments, they now see them as teachers that pointed them toward a deeper understanding of themselves. That perspective has replaced uncertainty with confidence because they no longer feel lost in comparison. They feel guided by experience because your heart needs this right now. The most meaningful relationships rarely leave behind only memories. They leave behind wisdom that continues shaping every decision long after the chapter has ended. Your soulmate now understands that this connection gave them something far greater than temporary happiness. It gave them the ability to recognize sincerity, appreciate emotional safety, and value the quiet strength of genuine companionship. Those lessons have become part of who they are, influencing the way they love, the way they trust, and the way they choose to build meaningful connections moving forward. So as this story comes to its close, one truth remains. Your soulmate no longer believes that every relationship should feel exactly the same. Instead, they understand that truly meaningful connections leave lasting fingerprints on the heart, quietly shaping our values and reminding us what matters most. Rather than holding on to comparison, they now carry gratitude. Rather than chasing the impossible, they choose to honor the lessons they have learned. And with that new understanding, they step into the future with greater wisdom, deeper compassion, and the quiet confidence that the strongest connections are remembered not because they were flawless, but because they inspired lasting growth, genuine understanding, and a truer version of the person they were always meant to become.